Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
The morning Jenna collapsed in her flower shop across the canal, I was reorganizing the staff picks shelf at Page and Harbor, cracking jokes about a misprinted cookbook that had roasted chicken listed under desserts. I didn't get to the punchline. My phone buzzed with a call from Diane, her shop neighbor. She fainted, Miles. She's breathing but pale as the wall. I was already grabbing my keys before she finished. My name's Miles Harper. I'm 33. I manage a little indie bookstore in Ballard, Seattle. Jenna's my wife. She's 31, runs her own flower business 2 blocks from mine. We live above a bakery in a 3rd-floor walk-up. And until that morning, I thought the worst thing I'd be dealing with was printer ink and late deliveries. Jenna tried to wave me off when I pulled up. "Just stood up too fast," she mumbled, sitting on an overturned flower bucket, dirt on her knees. But her skin was gray and cold, and there were weird, blotchy bruises on her arms that looked like someone had taken a watercolor brush to her skin and smudged it halfway through. She didn't argue when I said, "We're going in." Before we start, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, which city, which country. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Okay, here's the story. At UW Medical Center, they took one look in triage and paged someone, then someone else. I didn't even get to fill out her full name before they were pushing her into a room and telling me to wait. By afternoon, I was in a hallway with a hematologist named Dr. Patel, who talked like he didn't know how to sugarcoat anything. "Severe aplastic anemia," he said. "Her bone marrow's failing. No production of red cells, white cells, platelets. Her immune system is basically shutting down." I heard the words, but they didn't stick. What did stick were the beeping monitors, the way her hand looked too small under the IV tape, the bruises I'd ignored for weeks thinking maybe she was just clumsy from lifting buckets. Looking back, I should have caught it when she started getting winded climbing our stairs. 3 flights, and she'd stop halfway, clutching the rail like a grandma. "Must be allergies," she'd joke. This woman carries 6 buckets of peonies without blinking. But stairs? Dr. Patel said transplant. That's what it would take. Preferably a sibling. Jenna's adopted. No known biological relatives, no siblings. Her adoptive parents live in Spokane. Decent people. Kept a shoebox with her baby picture and a sealed file that never got opened. I called them. Lorraine and Gerald. They made it to Seattle in 4 hours flat and walked into the ICU like they owned the place. Lorraine barely looked at Jenna before saying, "Miles, we need to explore private options, like UW was a sketchy pop-up tent in a parking lot." The nights started blending. That ICU hum, the smell of antiseptic and bleach, the sound of heels on polished floors. I texted Marlena, the bookstore owner, told her I'd be out for a while. Didn't say how long, didn't know. I started sleeping in a hospital chair with my head against Jenna's blanket, while she tried to act like she wasn't scared. One of the transplant coordinators gave me a pamphlet with a chart that was supposed to be a timeline, but it looked more like a warning. "It could take months," she said. "Sometimes longer." There was no guarantee of anything. I stepped into the atrium for air and watched a ferry glide past the giant windows like nothing in the world was breaking. A kid next to me asked his dad about pancakes. I stood there with my fingers laced so tight the bones hurt. That night, Jenna looked at me with dry eyes and said, "You'll run the shop and water the ranunculus, right?" I told her yeah, even though I could barely water myself at that point. I pressed my hand over the tape on her IV and said we'd figure it out. Because that's what you say, even when you're lying. By the 3rd day, they drew another round of blood, this time for a confirmatory HLA typing in case I'd somehow matched by miracle or mistake. No such luck. I asked the nurse twice just to be sure, and both times she shook her head with the kind of politeness that feels like a door closing. Jenna needed more platelets. Again. Her fever wouldn't quit, hovering around 101 all morning, then jumping to 102.8 like it was trying to win something. Dr. Patel brought in another specialist, Dr. Caldwell, from infectious disease. He flipped through her chart like it owed him something and said, "We've got a narrow window here. If the fever's infection-related and doesn't break, Transplant options will start closing. We're talking days, not weeks. Then he tapped the folder like maybe it would cough up a donor if he hit it hard enough. After he left, I stood by the window pretending I was reading the parking signs outside. Behind me, Jenna was quiet. Like always when she's in pain. That woman has two modes, sarcasm and silence. And silence meant it was bad. Lorraine cornered me in the hallway 10 minutes later with her arms crossed and a new idea ready to go. There's a clinic in Bellevue, private concierge oncology. They do transplants. High success rates, tailored care. I think we should move her there. Bone marrow doesn't care about concierge, Lorraine. Her lips pulled into a tight line like I'd just insulted her church. I'm trying to explore options. She's already at one of the best hospitals in the country. This isn't a hotel reservation. She's my daughter. She's my wife. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked toward the elevators, her heels sharp on the floor like punctuation marks. I didn't follow. Around noon, I ran to the store to sort out payroll. I hadn't been in for more than 15 minutes since Jenna collapsed. The front window still had her sign up for the fall bouquet pre-orders. Half the vases were empty, and the staff picks I'd organized were already in disarray. A certified letter was shoved under the door with my name on it. Our landlord was jacking up rent by 18% and flipping us to month in January. Redevelopment planned, the letter said. I sat on the packing stool by the counter and stared at the ceiling like it might blink first. If I opened my mouth, I was going to scream. One of our regulars, Owen, came in with a coffee and clocked me instantly. He's this tall, wiry kid with more tattoos than sense. 27 maybe, but solid. He looked at me, handed over a granola bar and said, "I'll handle the volunteers today. You go back." I didn't argue. I pocketed the bar and walked out. Back at the hospital, Jenna was burning up again. I wiped her forehead with the same damp cloth I'd used 3 times already and tried to keep things light. "There was a guy at the store last week," I said. Insisted his dog needed a library card. Wanted to know what section had books about poodles solving crimes. She didn't laugh out loud, but her eyes twitched a little. That's all I got. A flicker. No smile. They added her to the urgent donor search list. It felt like yelling into a canyon and waiting for your echo to bring back a bone marrow match. The transplant team made me sign more forms. Consents, releases, emergency plans. I stared at the little lines where you're supposed to put your initials, like maybe the answer was hidden in there somewhere if I looked hard enough. That evening, Lorraine showed up again, this time with a tote bag, like she was moving into Jenna's hospital room permanently. She unpacked snacks, tea, a tablet loaded with movies, and then laid a brochure down on Jenna's tray table. High gloss, full color, pictures of leafy courtyards and smiling nurses offering fruit-infused water like it was the damn 4 seasons of cancer care. Jenna looked at her and said, barely above a whisper, "Mom, stop." Lorraine didn't. She just adjusted the brochure like the angle made it more convincing. I didn't fight her anymore. I just walked over and moved the brochure off the tray. Later, I checked our joint account. Between parking, hospital meals, gas, meds, and co-pays, the number in the corner of my banking app looked like it was trying to shrink itself out of view. I opened Jenna's subscription list for the Peony Club. 38 clients, some prepaid for 3 months. I emailed all of them with refunds and apologies and promises I wasn't sure I'd be able to keep. By the 6th message, the words started blending together. By the 10th, my eyes went static. The nurse came in to change out another bag of red cells. I watched her hands move. Steady, practiced, calm, while the bag dripped into my wife's veins. Outside the window, the sky was going purple over the sound. Inside, I felt like I was stuck in a room with no clocks and a fire somewhere behind the walls. If someone had walked in just then and said, "We found her long-lost sibling," I would have handed over the store, my truck, and every signed first edition we had. I would have traded the walls, the roof, the cash drawer, all of it. I didn't care. If there was a lever somewhere in the world that could bring Jenna a real match, I would have yanked it so hard I'd rip the floor up with it. But there was no lever, just the beep of monitors, the hum of machines, and the weight of another day that didn't bring good news. I ducked out to the loading dock on day 6, not to cry, not to scream, just to breathe. I'd been living on hospital coffee, stale vending machine muffins, and a 5-hour loop of alarms and overhead pages. The air hit me like a slap, sharp and cold, laced with the stink of cigarette smoke. There were 2 lab techs by the dumpster, badges flipped backward, smoking like they were on break from a war. They were talking about the Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend. One of them, shorter guy, probably early 40s, flicked his ash and said, "That florist in 6NE? She's a dead ringer for that woman in Port Townsend who carves oars. It's uncanny." I froze. My body literally went still, like my brain couldn't process what just hit it. He laughed it off like it was nothing, like it didn't matter that he might have just dropped a grenade into my life. I kept my voice calm, casual. "You know her name? The woman in Port Townsend?" He shrugged. "Nah, man. Just know she works at some boat shop near the marina. Tall, dark hair. Saw her at a booth once. Could be twins, I'm telling you." I kept my face blank, then walked back inside so fast my legs felt like springs. I went straight through the main lobby, past a Thank You Healthcare Heroes banner, the hand sanitizer stations, a badly framed photo of Mount Rainier, and straight into Jenna's room. She was half asleep, the blanket pulled to her collarbone, face pale against the pillow. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand, already knowing how this would go. "There's a woman in Port Townsend," I said. "Works in a boat shop. Some lab tech said she looks exactly like you." She opened her eyes, slow. "Miles," she said, squeezing my fingers, "don't chase wild geese." But her eyes weren't saying no. They were saying go. Run. Chase the damn goose. I was about to grab my jacket and leave when Dr. Caldwell showed up. He didn't knock, just walked in like people always do in hospitals. "Her fever's up again," he said, flipping through the chart. "We need directed platelets today. Any healthy donor. We don't wait." Lorraine stood up immediately. "I'll do it." "I'm cleared too," I said, even though I already felt a flush creeping up my neck. Both of us got screened. She passed. I didn't. Mild fever, barely 100, but enough to disqualify me. The nurse gave me that neutral, sorry face, and I wanted to punch a wall. Watching my mother-in-law in the donor chair shouldn't have felt like a miracle, but it did. She sat completely still, staring at the machine like she could will it to work faster. She didn't look at me once. When it was done, she stood up, gathered her purse, and walked out without saying a word. The nurse hung the golden yellow bag and hooked it into Jenna's IV line. Within 2 hours, her numbers started to blip up. Just barely, but up. Back at the store, chaos had its own flavor. Owen texted while I was in the hallway outside ICU. "You're trending." A bookstagrammer posted some half-assed story about how I was cold during last month's fundraiser. Now we were getting roasted online like we kicked puppies. Owen, bless him, replied from the shop's account. "Owner's wife is in ICU. Cool your jets." That shut most of them up. I called Marlena. "I want to host a mobile blood drive outside the store next week." She didn't hesitate. "Yes, tell me what you need." That's why I work for her. Not for the landlord who just upped our rent. Not for someone with 10 leases and a vacation home in Maui. For her. That night, Jenna slid me her phone while I was sitting by the bed flipping through insurance forms. "If you see her, show her this," she said. On the screen was a selfie from last summer. Her in a blue beanie, grinning at the camera, sunflower petals in her hair. "Tell her I'm not crazy." Her voice cracked like she hated even needing to ask. "I will," I said, and meant it. I went to the family lounge, found the clunky old desktop no one ever used, and printed the photo on regular white paper. The colors came out weird, her skin too pink, the sky dull, but it would do. I stood there holding the page like an idiot, wondering if I was actually about to drive across the Sound, chasing a woman whose name I didn't even know. The next morning, I told the transplant coordinator I'd be gone for a few hours. She looked at me over her glasses like she wanted to ask questions, but didn't. Probably figured I needed air or sleep or food. I needed none of those. I needed the woman who carved oars. I caught the 8:35 a.m. ferry out of Edmonds, sat near the railing, and drank a cup of vending machine coffee that tasted like hot cardboard. Gulls squawked and picked fights over nothing. In my backpack were 4 things: the printed photo of Jenna in the beanie, her hospital patient sticker, a notebook where I'd scrawled boat shops near Point Hudson, and the thinnest sliver of hope I'd ever carried. Port Townsend didn't waste time pretending to be something it wasn't. It was all charm and grit. Victorian rooftops, old brick buildings, the main drag with an espresso place every other block, and the whole place smelled like cedar, salt water, and diesel. I asked a guy at a bakery if he knew where I could find someone who carves oars. He looked up from his phone with jam on his chin and said, "Try Salish cedar and canvas. Ask for Shelby." I didn't even finish my muffin. The shop was tucked near the marina, half showroom, half wood shop. Boats in pieces lined the walls like puzzles waiting to be solved. It smelled like varnish and sawdust and sea air. A woman was planing a spar, long arms, strong shoulders, hair tied in a quick knot that didn't care if it held or not. She looked up when I stepped in. And I swear, for a second, I forgot to breathe. Same eyes, same jawline. Older, maybe by 5 or 6 years, but it was there. "Can I help you?" she asked, wiping her hands on her jeans. I pulled the folded photo from my jacket and held it out. "My wife's in the hospital. Some guys at the hospital said you look like her. I know this sounds insane, but I had to come." She didn't grab it right away, just stared at it like it might burn. Then she set the hand plane down, walked around the workbench, and took the photo with both hands. "I get told I have that face," she said. Then her voice dropped lower. "My mom told me once she had a baby when she was young. Signed papers. The baby got placed with a family in Seattle. I never knew her name." "Jenna," I said. The whole room went still. I thought maybe she'd hug me or at least sit down. Instead, she took a step back like I'd stuck a needle in her. "I don't know you," she said, sharp but not mean. "I'm not saying yes to anything. You can't just walk in here with a picture and ask." "I know," I cut in. "I know how it sounds. But she's in ICU with severe aplastic anemia, her marrow shut down, no match on the registry, no siblings, no time, directed platelets bought us a few days. That's it." Shelby bit the inside of her cheek and glanced over at the open garage door, like maybe if she looked hard enough, she could disappear into the harbor. "Blood is one thing," she said finally. "Marrow is something else." I didn't have a counter for that. She was right. It wasn't a haircut or a favor or a donation drive. It was anesthesia, surgery, risk. It was her body, her call. She folded the photo and handed it back. "I need time." "I get that." I pulled a card from my wallet and scrawled my number on the back. "I'll answer any time. Doesn't matter when." We stood there with the workbench between us, like it was a border neither of us had the passport for. I left the photo on the bench anyway, nodded and walked out. Outside, the wind hit harder than before. I got to the parking lot and fumbled for my keys just as my phone started buzzing. Lorraine. I should have let it go to voicemail. I didn't. "Gerald's cousin knows an oncologist in Bellevue," she started. "We should transfer Jenna now before she's too fragile to move." "We're not moving her. You don't get to monopolize the decisions, Miles. She said she wants to stay at UW. She's scared. She's not thinking clearly. I'm not debating this in a parking lot." And I hung up. I wasn't proud of it, but I knew if I didn't, I was going to say something that would light the whole bridge on fire. I was halfway to my car when a guy in dusty coveralls stepped out from behind a stack of wooden paddles. Looked like he'd been listening without trying to. You looking for Shelby? He asked. Yeah. He nodded once. She's stubborn, but she's not cold. She just don't like being rushed. Give her a night. I was already turning away, but then he added, We saw your wife's flowers on Instagram last spring. Some wedding shoot with blue hydrangeas. Looked like the same face. Weird, right? Yeah, I said, weird. I sat in the car with the engine off, staring out at the marina. Tried to picture a day after this one that still had Jenna in it. It felt like trying to hold water in my hands. I pulled out my phone and called Owen. I need you to file for a street permit for next week, I said. Blood drive, outside the store. He didn't even pause. Already done. Got a friend at City Hall. Of course you do. Get back to her. I've got the shop. I hung up and sat there a while longer, hands gripping the wheel like it might steady anything at all. When Shelby called, it was 7:12 the next morning. No hello, no lead-in, just straight to it. I found something, she said. My mom kept a form from Jefferson County Hospital, dated 1992. Says, mother declined to name father. Female infant, released to agency. Birth name temporarily listed as June Chambers. I was parked outside the hospital, gripping my coffee like it might decide what happened next. June. That name was buried somewhere in Jenna's adoption file. In faded handwriting none of us had ever been able to make out. I remember Jenna once joked it looked like Juice Chalmers. But June Chambers? That tracked. My hands went cold on the steering wheel. Can you come to Seattle? I can be at UW by noon. She hung up before I could say thank you, which honestly made it easier. She showed up in a blue flannel that could have come from Jenna's closet. Worn soft, sleeves pushed to the elbows. She had a duffel bag, a determined walk, and the kind of face that looked like it didn't flinch easy. But when she stepped into Jenna's room and saw my wife, pale and hooked up to 3 different IV lines, her whole body stiffened, like she was bracing for a wave to hit. Then she looked at me and said, Where do I sign? Lab techs came in with clipboards and gloves. They did a cheek swab for the HLA typing, plus a fast ABO to see if her blood type could help while we waited. Dr. Patel asked gently if she'd consider giving platelets in the meantime to buy Jenna more time. Shelby just nodded. I'll do both. No hesitation, not for effect. It was a decision already made. Lorraine showed up halfway through like a storm front rolling in. She barely said hi before pulling Shelby aside in the hallway, talking low but urgent. I stayed close enough to hear a few choice phrases. Long-term risks, future children, decision you can't take back. Shelby didn't blink. I work with chisels and steam bends, ma'am. I can handle a needle. Lorraine shut up after that. I think we all did. By 3:40, the platelet bag was hung. Jenna's numbers inched up, slow but steady. Her cheeks picked up half a shade of color that only someone like me would notice. Shelby stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes on the floor. She didn't come closer. Didn't try to make it a hallmark moment. She looked like someone still trying to figure out which room she belonged in. I thanked her, probably too many times. Don't, she said. I'm not doing this for you. Understood, I said. Still. Thank you. Later, we ended up in the family lounge eating vending machine pretzels like it was dinner. Shelby leaned back in the plastic chair and said, My stepdad, Walt, does ferry maintenance. Last spring, he saw a florist at a wedding in Port Townsend. Said she looked exactly like me. I thought he was full of it. You're saying we owe all of this to an Instagram photo and a dad with good eyesight? Pretty much. She texted her mom, said she needed to talk. About 20 minutes later, her phone rang. She put it on speaker, and I swear the first thing we heard was someone crying. Darla's voice was soft, scared and cracked in places. I signed the refusal at 20. I was alone. My parents didn't even know I was pregnant until the day I gave birth. I told the nurse I didn't want to name the father because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I asked if I could leave a letter. I don't know if they let me. My chest hurt in a weird, unfamiliar place. Not pity, not anger. Just the ache of hearing someone say sorry for a wound they couldn't see, couldn't fix. You don't have to explain, Shelby said, staring at the ceiling. I get it. I do. Darla exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 30 years. Later, in the consult room, we laid it out for Dr. Patel and the transplant coordinator. The records were unofficial. The name never legally tied to Jenna, but the birth year, the hospital, the mother's refusal to name a father, it all matched. So did the face. And the blood. Half-sisters, I said. Same mother, different dads. Dr. Patel nodded. We'll wait on the HLA confirmation, but if this lines up, it's the best lead we've had. I walked Shelby down to the parking garage. We didn't say much. The air smelled like rain on concrete, and the fluorescence made everything look 2 shades paler. She stopped by her car, popped the trunk, and pulled out a water bottle and a hoodie. If the match is real, she said, I'm doing it. All the way. You don't have to. I said I'm doing it. She looked at me dead on. You're not the only one who wants her to live. I just thanked her again, probably for the 10th time. She rolled her eyes but didn't tell me to shut up. Back upstairs, Jenna was asleep with one hand over her stomach like she always does when she's resting deep. Her other hand was taped up from the latest IV poke. The platelet bag was almost empty. I sat beside her and listened to the monitors humming their usual rhythm. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was just waiting for the bottom to fall out again. We didn't have a guarantee, not yet. But we had a shot. Waiting for the HLA typing felt like standing on a frozen lake and daring it to crack. Every hour stretched long and thin, and I couldn't sit still. So I drove back out to Port Townsend and parked across from the county courthouse with the kind of grim focus I usually reserve for taxes and car repairs. Inside, I paid $36 to the clerk at Vital Records for a record search. She didn't even flinch when I said the year. I guess 1992's not so ancient in their system. She clicked around, looked up, and said, We have a relinquishment of parental rights filed from Jefferson County Hospital that year. Infant female, but sealed. I can confirm it's archived, not disclose anything else. It didn't matter. That was enough. One more piece clicking into place. Back in the car, I opened Shelby's text again. The photo of her mom's form. Black and white scan, slightly crooked, with the box checked, mother declined to name father, and another line that read, infant transferred to agency care upon discharge. Underneath that, in a different pen, someone had scribbled, no hold. Shelby had texted along with it. I know that handwriting. It's my mom's. Reading that form hurt in a way that wasn't mine. Exactly, but landed anyway. I imagined Jenna as a baby, swaddled, nameless, passed from one set of hands to another like a forgotten envelope. And someone scared and 20 years old, signing a line and hoping that would be enough. When I got back to the hospital, Lorraine was waiting outside Jenna's room. Not alone. She had a man with her in a navy suit and a fake concerned face. This is Trent, she said, like we were at brunch. We need to revisit Jenna's medical power of attorney. I stared at the folder he was holding and said, No, we don't. She signed it back in spring, Trent offered. It's a living document. Things change. She named me. It's not up for revisiting. He gave me that tight, professional smile lawyers get when they're trying to be polite before going in for the kill. We just want what's best for her, Miles. Then get out of the way. No joke, they tried to slide the new forms onto the tray table during a dressing change. While the nurse had her gloves on and Jenna was half awake, trying to swallow a cup of pills. I stepped in front of the table and said, You need to leave. The nurse backed me up without blinking. We don't do ambushes in this unit, she said. Lorraine sniffed and acted offended. Trent gathered the papers like someone had spit on them. Later that night, when the room was quiet, I sat by Jenna and showed her the scan of the refusal form. She looked at it for a long time, didn't say a word. Then finally, tears started to slip down her cheeks. Hey, I said, we don't have to. No, she said, cutting me off. It's good. It matters. She wiped her face with the edge of the blanket. At least I know. At least I was real to someone for long enough to sign something. She folded the page carefully, corner to corner, like it was a birth certificate. She tucked it under her pillow. At the bookstore, the blood drive pulled 89 sign-ups in one afternoon. Marlena borrowed a sandwich board from a bakery, and I wrote Jenna's Army in chalk with a busted pen that smeared across my hands. It didn't matter. People showed up. Even a local TV crew caught wind of it. They aired a 30-second clip at 5:47 p.m., just long enough for us to look human on camera. The landlord's rep emailed again the next morning. He'd heard about the event and wanted to reconnect about the lease renewal. Marlena wrote back with a screenshot of the news clip and one line. We aren't going anywhere while we're saving a life. It wasn't legally binding, but he didn't reply again for 2 days. The next day, a couple came in with a wrapped package. I didn't recognize them right away, but the woman smiled and said, "She helped us last winter. Found a book no one else could track down. Wouldn't take a tip." I opened it up after they left. Inside was the out-of-print hardcover and a check for $1,250. Memo line said, "For whatever the hospital won't cover." I just sat there holding it, forgetting to breathe. Around 2 a.m., Shelby texted. Mom said she tried to leave a letter at the agency. Doesn't know if they ever kept it. I'm mad at her. I'm mad for her. I'll see you in the morning. The next day, I sat beside Jenna and read out loud from a paperback about watermen in the Puget Sound. My voice kept catching, because the words all hit differently now. Jenna, halfway between sleep and irritation, kept correcting my boat terms. It's not a transom, it's a gunnel, she mumbled without opening her eyes. I like transom better. It's wrong. Still sounds cooler. She cracked the faintest smile. I didn't know if Shelby would be a match. I didn't know if the letter Darla wrote had ever made it anywhere. I didn't even know if Lorraine was done trying to pull legal stunts. But I knew this. Jenna had her name. She had her sister. She had a page that proved she wasn't forgotten. And tomorrow, we might find out if her marrow had a match. The HLA results came back just after lunch. Dr. Patel walked into Jenna's room with a folder and a grin that wasn't wide but was real. Very strong sibling match, he said. I didn't say anything. I just sat down because my knees forgot how to work. Shelby leaned back against the wall and exhaled like she'd been holding it since birth. Okay, she said. That's all. Just okay. Like she was ordering a sandwich instead of stepping into the middle of someone else's storm. Patel gave us the plan. Start preconditioning Jenna for transplant, test Shelby one more time for infectious markers, get her pre-op done, then lock the dates. The team was already moving. But infectious disease showed up 5 minutes later, and Dr. Caldwell didn't look thrilled. He pointed at the labs and tapped the monitor. The fever's shifting, he said. We've got 5 days to condition and transplant before this tips somewhere we can't pull back from. Maybe less. No one asked what somewhere meant. We didn't need the details spelled out. Shelby got scheduled for bone marrow harvest, not peripheral collection. Her choice. Old school, straight from the hip bones, under anesthesia. She said, if we're doing this, I want to do it the way they built it to last. I had no argument. A nurse handed her a patient guide in a binder, full of charts and questions and medical diagrams. Shelby didn't open it. She stuffed it in her backpack like she already knew what needed to be done. And then, of course, Lorraine. I found her near the elevators, pulling Shelby aside with her arms crossed and her mouth in that tone. I couldn't hear all of it, but I caught the words, risk, future children, unnecessary sacrifice, and regret. Shelby came back 10 minutes later, head tilted, jaw clenched, like she'd bitten something hard and didn't want to spit it out. She didn't say a word, just sat and scrolled her phone like nothing happened. I marched Lorraine down to the first-floor coffee kiosk and told her flat out, you don't get to scare her. I'm trying to make sure no one's acting on guilt or pressure. I'm doing what Jenna asked. The only thing she's asked. She's sick. She doesn't understand. No, you don't understand. You don't get to manipulate her or Shelby. Not anymore. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't shake, and I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked back to the ICU like I had something worth defending. Because I did. Back at the shop, the blood drive turned into a 2-day pop-up. Owen convinced a local band to play in the alley. He put out a tip jar labeled platelets and petals, and didn't tell me about it until someone slid in 2 Mariners tickets with a note that just said, "Use later." Later that day, Walt sent me a photo of a wooden box he'd been making. Clean lines, simple brass hinges, the kind of thing that looked like it belonged on a fireplace mantel. Text said, "For the papers, so the past has a place." I'm not a crier. But I had to sit down in the stairwell and stay there for a while, until the lump in my throat gave up. Shelby's pre-op was the next morning. The anesthesiologist ran through what felt like 100 questions. Blood pressure history, family allergies, post-op expectations. Shelby answered them all steady, no fluff, like someone who works with dangerous tools every day. She caught me watching her and said, "Don't look at me like a hero." I raised my eyebrows. Why not? Because I'm not doing this to be brave. It's family. Exactly, I said. That's the whole point. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. Jenna wrote her a thank you card with a ballpoint hospital pen and her IV still taped to her arm. The writing sloped downhill, but she signed it, "To the sister I never got to steal clothes from." Shelby read it, laughed once, and tucked it into her wallet like it was worth more than anything in the room. That night I went back to Jenna's flower shop and opened the cooler. Most of what was in there had wilted or browned at the edges. I tossed what couldn't be saved, then made 5 rough bouquets from what could. Threw together tulips with half-open roses, leftover baby's breath, some eucalyptus that still smelled sharp. I brought one to the nurse's station with a sticky note, "For the folks who keep her here." I don't know if they read it or not. I don't care. It was the first time in weeks I made anything that felt like giving. Shelby had to be at pre-op by 6. We met in the family lounge just before they called her back. She was in a hoodie, hospital socks, and one of those scratchy gowns that never tie right. She looked tired but focused, like someone stepping into a job she didn't ask for but was still going to finish. I walked her to the surgery doors. "You've got this," I said. She gave me a sideways look. Obviously. That was it. No big speech, no hand-holding. Just that Shelby way of saying, "Don't waste time on what's already decided." While she was under, I signed the last transplant consent form. The stack of paperwork didn't even faze me anymore. I used to get sweaty over signing for certified mail. Now I signed with the same focus as tying my shoes. You start learning the lines, initial here, date there, and it starts to feel like the only thing you can control. The harvest took just over 2 hours. Walt and Darla arrived midway and sat with me in the waiting area. Walt read the same boating magazine cover to cover twice, and Darla kept wringing her hands like she was trying to squeeze time out of them. She turned to me quietly and said, "I carried one baby and let her go. I'm not letting the other one go anywhere." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She reached over and touched my sleeve like she needed to feel something steady. Back upstairs, a nurse rolled in the marrow bag. Warm. Red. Alive. I didn't expect to get choked up over a sack of blood and cells, but standing there I felt like someone had just dropped a heart in the room and said, "Here. Try again." Dr. Patel checked Jenna's vitals and looked at me. "Let's do it." He didn't say it dramatically. He just meant it. They hooked the bag to her IV line, started the drip. There was no music, no speeches, no ceremony. Just a quiet rhythm of machines and medicine. Jenna slept through most of it. She looked the way she always did when she was bone-tired, arm over her stomach, mouth barely open, like she was dreaming her way out of the room. I watched her monitor like it might spell out the future. Numbers rose and fell, tiny green hills on black screens. I don't pretend to know what half of them mean. But when one line dipped, a nurse adjusted the rate and nodded like it was fine. 30 minutes in, Jenna flushed deep red and started to shiver. Her breath hitched. The machines beeped fast, and then faster. Staff moved in, calm but quick, pushing meds, lowering the drip. I backed into the corner with my hands on my head like I was under arrest. Dr. Caldwell came in and said, "Common reaction," which is code for, "Don't panic, but also don't look away." They stabilized her within 10 minutes. I started breathing again somewhere around minute 8. About an hour after it started, Shelby rolled in, pale and slouched in a wheelchair with a blanket over her lap and a cup of ice chips in her hand. Her hair was messy and her eyelids drooped, but she still managed to smirk. "I brought my good marrow," she said. Jenna stirred, cracked one eye, and reached out just enough to brush her fingers against Shelby's hand. "Keep some for you." They almost laughed. Almost. I stepped into the hallway and checked my phone. The store had posted a photo of the marrow bag. No names, no faces, just the bag hanging on the stand with sunlight behind it. Owen captioned it, "This is what love looks like." The comments were flooded. People offering to donate blood, send food, cover shifts. Even a guy from Bainbridge who messaged asking if we needed ferry vouchers for follow-ups. Strangers were offering things I didn't even think to ask for. Lorraine came into the room late in the afternoon. She didn't bring papers or questions or brochures, just sat in the chair near Jenna's bed and watched the machines like she finally understood they weren't for show. When Jenna stirred and asked for water, Lorraine stood up and held the straw steady while she drank. I looked away. Let them have that moment. By midnight, the room was quiet except for a distant monitor in someone else's room down the hall. I leaned against the bed rail, forehead resting on the cool metal. My phone buzzed. Text from Shelby, "Still here." I stared at it for a second and replied, "Same," and that was enough. Day plus 7, then 12, then 18. I started learning the transplant calendar like it was a second language, one that counted forward, not by weeks or weekends, but by cells and neutrophils. Jenna's numbers climbed like an old elevator, slow, jittery, but still going up. Every morning, Dr. Patel smiled a little more. Not wide grins, not backslaps, just a shift at the corners of his mouth like he was starting to believe we might actually pull this off. Jenna's hair came out in clumps around day 11. She looked in the mirror, shrugged, and held out her hand for my mariner's cap. "It's better than looking like a dandelion that got mugged," she said. She was right. It did look better on her. We took a stupid selfie right there in the hospital room. She flashed a peace sign. I looked like I hadn't slept in a year. We sent it to Shelby with 3 crown emojis. A few days later, I saw Lorraine and Shelby standing in the hallway outside Jenna's room. Lorraine's arms were crossed, and her mouth was tight, but she didn't look ready to fight. When I passed by, I caught the tail end of it. I was scared. I got loud. That was it. No dramatic apology, no tears. Shelby nodded. "Me too." And just like that, it was done. Not fixed, but finished. Back at the bookstore, things started turning too. The neighborhood paper ran a front-page story. Title in bold across the top, "Books, Blooms, and Blood Drives. Ballard fights for one of its own." That same afternoon, our landlord's rep emailed, offering a revised lease. 3 years, fair rate. If we'd stop making him look like a villain. Marlena sent back, "We'll consider it," and nothing else. I started going home every 3rd night. The bed felt too big without Jenna. I watered the last few anemones she hadn't had time to cut and found 2 sealed envelopes in her kitchen junk drawer, both from old wedding clients. One thanked her for saving a disaster ceremony with 10 minutes and a glue gun. The other just said, "You made our day not just beautiful, but better." She never mentioned either. Classic Jenna. After discharge, we moved into the bubble. That's what they call it. post-transplant immunosuppression protocol. Masks inside the house, gloves for food, bleach for everything. I went overboard and fogged the couch with Lysol until she threatened to throw it out the window. "It smells like a YMCA pool in here," she said, cracking the window. "You need to chill." Shelby drove down twice a week like clockwork, usually with a mason jar of bone broth and cookies that tasted like walnut and regret. She never stayed long, but she always fixed something: cabinet hinges, a squeaky drawer, the towel rack in the bathroom. Said she couldn't sit still. Walt came once with her and ended up sanding our dining chairs in the driveway. Darla brought jam and left before anyone had to find something polite to say. One morning, a thin envelope showed up from the adoption agency. Inside were the only copies they were allowed to release. One was the standard form, Darla's refusal, already familiar from Shelby's photo. The other was a photocopy of a letter. "To who you are now," it began. "This was never about you not being wanted. It was about me being broken." Jenna read it once, then again, then folded it in half with hands that didn't shake anymore. "This is my whole beginning," she said. On 2 pages. We framed the refusal form and the letter side by side. Not because she wanted to stare at the past, but because it helped her remember she wasn't made from nothing. She taped a picture of her and Shelby underneath it, both of them holding tools, Jenna with clippers, Shelby with a chisel. "Looks like an ad for a very confused Etsy shop," she joked. I filed the renewal paperwork for the bookstore, added a new line to our business description. Community events in partnership with UW Blood Center. We booked 3 before spring even showed up on the calendar. Owen promised live music and aggressively bad coffee. I said, "That's the only kind people remember." 6 months later, we drove back to Port Townsend on a Saturday that didn't smell like bleach. No masks, no monitors, no charts taped to walls, just salt in the air and a sky so clear it made you suspicious. Jenna wore a scarf over the fuzz her hair had grown back. Shelby smelled like sawdust and engine oil. I wore the kind of quiet you only get after surviving something you weren't sure you could. Walt set up a little grill behind the shop. Old propane tank, half-rusted grate. The burgers stuck and the buns were a little stale, but it didn't matter. Darla brought potato salad with too much mustard, exactly like every mom in every backyard, and nobody complained. Lorraine and Gerald showed up with a plastic fruit tray and no pamphlets, no lectures, no sideways glances. Bellevue didn't come up once. We walked down by the marina while the burgers cooked. Jenna and Shelby did that dumb sister thing where they compared earlobes and insisted they looked the same even though they didn't. They laughed hard enough to snort, and I caught a photo of it without them noticing. They stopped at a skiff Shelby had restored, a clean white hull with oak trim, and Jenna ran her hand along the gunnel like she was touching a branch on the family tree. After food, I clinked the side of a mason jar and cleared my throat. I don't do speeches, but I did this one. "For the notes, for the blood, for the marrow," I said. "For showing up when we were drowning." People raised soda cans and plastic cups like they already knew the words. Nobody clapped. They didn't need to. My revenge, if you want to call it that, came slow. I made a donor wall at Page and Harbor, names handwritten on paper leaves that hung above the register. Customers asked about it. Some added their names. At the very top was one that just said, "Shelby, Sister," in clean black ink. No one else got a title. They didn't need it. The wall said everything. The landlord came by the shop last month, called it a drop-in to discuss synergies. I handed him a laminated copy of the neighborhood article and a printout of our new lease, the one with the 3-year clause about hosting blood drives. He skimmed it, signed without a word, and left. I slept like a rock that night. UW held a spring donor event in the hospital atrium. They asked Jenna to say a few words. She looked at me like she wanted a way out. I nodded. She stepped up to the mic in her boots and scarf and cleared her throat. "I grew up wanted," she said. "I just didn't know by who. Turns out it was by a guy who runs a bookstore and a woman with a boat shop." Half the room laughed into their napkins. Shelby was off to the side, arms folded, trying not to grin. Afterward, Lorraine hugged Shelby. Not a quick tap. A real hug. I saw her eyes water and decided not to say anything. Nobody gave speeches about who was right or who was wrong. But a few people who doubted me in the beginning kept their distance, like they were still rewriting their version of what happened. I let them. At home, I mounted the cedar box Walt made on the wall by the door. Inside it, the relinquishment form and Darla's letter lay flat, no creases. Next to them was a photo from the donor day. Jenna and Shelby in front of the hospital, holding hands and smiling like they didn't almost miss each other completely. Every time we leave the house, we touch the lid. It's not superstition. It's ritual. A way of saying, we carry this. We use the Mariners tickets that stranger mailed us. Same seats every time, right field line, row 20. We go to Port Townsend often enough that the barista knows our order. Double espresso for me, oat milk chai for Jenna. I still make bad jokes at the store. Jenna still corrects my Latin plant names from the aisle. Owen still writes captions that make us sound cooler than we are. I don't know what comes next. I don't know how long we get. But when the clock screamed, we didn't fold. We found our people, and we held on. If someone in your family needed you the way Jenna needed Shelby, do you think you'd step up or hesitate? Share your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, even dropping a quick comment like "good story" or sharing your thoughts really helps support the channel. Subscribe for more.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.